Today we're going to learn about Chapter 4, Section 2. We're going to discuss niches and community interactions. One of the most important things to know in this section is what a niche actually is. It is the range of physical and biological conditions in which a species lives. It is also the way the species obtains what it needs to survive and reproduce. Down below, we have an earthworm. And the earthworm's niche is also listed. It is a herbivore, a macro decomposer. It is an important source of food for birds, and it also helps to aerate the soil and increase soil fertility by manuring it with leaf litter. In order to understand niche completely, we have to also understand what tolerance is. Every species has its own range of tolerance. This is its ability to survive and reproduce under a range of environmental circumstances. Sometimes organisms can be put under stress. Whenever the environmental condition, for example temperature, stretches beyond the organism's optimum range, so here's their optimum, and here is stretching beyond their optimum range, the organism does experience stress. A lot of times this means that they will have to spend more energy on just maintaining homeostasis, and then they have less energy for growth and even reproduction. So their numbers, their population size, will be lower at the upper and lower limits of the optimum range. Just in case you didn't know what optimum means, here's the definition. It is what is most conducive to a favorable outcome, or in other words, whatever is the best. Organisms do have an upper and lower limit of tolerance for each environmental factor. Beyond these limits, beyond the high and beyond the low, they will not survive. That helps to determine where the organisms will live or their habitat. Let's talk about our worm again and the word niche. A niche does not just describe in the environment where an organism lives. It also describes how it interacts with biotic and abiotic factors in the environment. It doesn't just include physical and biological aspects, but also the way in which the organism uses them. So if you were to look at the worm's niche below, you can pick out the abiotic and biotic factors. It is a herbivore. It does become food for birds, so biotic factors, and it aids in the aeration of soil, which is an abiotic factor. This section doesn't just cover niches and an organism's role in a community, but it also covers community interactions. So the first interaction we're going to talk about is competition, and we're going to discuss how competition shapes communities. By causing a species to divide resources, competition will actually help to determine the number and kinds of species in a community and the niche each species occupies. How one organism interacts with others in the community is an important part of defining the niche of an organism. Competition occurs when organisms attempt to use the same limited ecological resource in the same place at the same time, just like this lion and hyena. In another example, in the forest, there are plant roots that compete for resources, such as water and nutrients in the soil. Animals also compete for resources, such as food, mates, and places to live and raise their young. Competition can be one of two kinds. If it is between members of the same species, as in these deer, it is called intraspecific. And if it's between members of different species, again, like the lion and hyena, it is known as interspecific. Direct competition between different species almost always produces a winner and a loser. The losing species dies out. The competitive exclusion principle says that no two species can occupy the same niche at exactly the same habitat at the same time. If two species attempt to occupy the same niche, one of them is going to be better at competing for the limited resources and will eventually exclude the other species. As a result of competitive exclusion, natural communities rarely have niches that overlap significantly. In this example, there were 2 species of paramecium grown. You are going to do a virtual lab with these 2 species of paramecium at some point in time. When they were first grown in separate cultures, but under the same conditions, both populations grew very well. However, when both species were grown together in the same culture, one species outcompeted the other, and the less competitive species did not survive. Instead of competing for similar resources, some organisms will divide the resources. For example, there are 3 species of warbler that live in North America. They live in the same trees and all feed on insects. But one species actually feeds high on the tree, one feeds low on the tree, and one feeds in the middle. In this way, they're not actually competing with each other. Another type of community interaction that I'm sure you are all familiar with is the predator-prey relationship. It's an interaction in which one animal, the predator, captures and feeds on the other animal, the prey. This is also called predation. Predators can affect the size of prey populations in a community and can determine the places where the prey will live. Birds of prey, for example, can play an important role in regulating the population sizes of mice or voles, like here. This graph shows a very basic model of how the population sizes of predator and prey change over time. You'll notice that when the prey population is high, directly behind it will be the predator population rising. If the predators eat too many of the prey population lowers, but then so does the predator. Soon following, the prey population size can rise again and then lower because the predator population. This is a basic pattern. Another community interaction is that between the herbivores and the plants. An interaction in which one animal, the herbivore, feeds on producers is called herbivory. Herbivores, like the ring-tailed lemur, can affect the size and the distribution of plant populations in a community and can determine the places in which the plants can grow and survive. For example, here we have the white-tailed deer that are actually eliminating a lot of their favorite foods from places across the United States. Sometimes changes in the population of even a single species can lead to dramatic changes in the structure of a community. These species are often called a keystone species. One really good example are the sea otters that live off the Pacific coast of North America. Sea otters eat large quantities of sea urchin, and sea urchin eat large quantities of giant kelp. About a century ago, the sea otters were almost eliminated by hunting, and unexpectedly, the kelp forest began to vanish. Without the otters as predators, the sea urchins began to devour the kelp down to bare rock. Without the kelp to provide habitat, many other animals began to disappear. Otters were the keystone species in this community. Soon, otters began to be protected as an endangered species. Once their population began to recover, the sea urchin populations dropped and the kelp forests began to thrive again. Recently, though, the otter population has begun to fall again, and no one is really sure why. The next 3 kinds of community interactions are called symbiotic relationships. Any relationships in which 2 species live closely together is called symbiosis. Symbiosis means living together. There are 3 main types of symbiotic relationships. They are mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. One type of symbiotic relationship is mutualism. In mutualism, both benefit from their relationship. The example given below is that of a sea anemone and a clownfish. The sea anemone has a sting. Its two functions are to capture prey and to protect the anemone from predators. There are some fish, though, that can still manage to eat anemone tentacles. The clownfish is a fish that is immune to the anemone stings. When threatened by a predator, the clownfish will seek shelter by snuggling deep into the anemone's tentacles. If an anemone-eating species tries to attack the anemone, the clownfish will dart out and chase the predator away. This kind of relationship, again, where both of them benefit, is known as mutualism. Another symbiotic relationship is called parasitism. In parasitism, there's a relationship in which one organism lives inside or on another organism and does harm. For example, we have tapeworms that live in the intestines of mammals. We have lice, ticks, and even leeches that can harm us. In parasitism, the parasite actually obtains all or part of its nutritional needs from the host organism. Generally, the parasite will weaken the host, but it doesn't kill them. The host is usually much larger than the parasite. Commensalism is the last type of symbiotic relationship. In this example of commensalism, there are barnacles that live on the skin of whales. They perform no real service to the whale, but they don't harm it either. So the barnacles are the only organism that benefits from this relationship. The whale is not helped or harmed. In commensalism, this is a relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. In this section, we discussed quite a few things. The first one was niche. Remember, this is an organism's role in its environment, including the interactions it has between the abiotic and biotic factors of its environment. We also briefly discussed tolerance, which is the ability for an organism to live within certain environmental constraints. Both of these determine where an organism can survive. We also talked about different kinds of community interactions. We talked about competition and how that can drive organisms to live in certain places. We also discussed symbiosis and the three types of symbiosis. One type of symbiotic relationship is mutualism. This is when two organisms live within a close personal relationship that they both benefit from. Next is parasitism. This is a type of symbiotic relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is harmed. And finally, commensalism. This is a relationship where one organism benefits and the other isn't helped or harmed. All three of these are types of symbiosis.